down, but thank you everyone for being prompt, and welcome to Spring. We're really pleased to be joined by guests from companies like the Department for International Trade, Innovate UK, Utilities, Supply Chain, and even as far as Australia. It's really pleasing to see you all here engaging with Spring and living that innovative spirit by getting behind a company aimed at being disruptive in the UK water sector. So in terms of session plans and engagement, we're going to first hear from Carly Perry, who will talk us through the latest developments and plans for the launch for Spring on the 20th of December. We'll then open it out to a panel discussion with some of Spring's key stakeholders. And then finally, we'll open up to a Q&A, which is going to be hosted on Glisser. So there should now be a slide with those details on it. It's really simple and easy to use and anonymous. So please enter that URL to pose a question, or of course, reach out to myself or Carly after this session. One last note on housekeeping: the session is being recorded, but hopefully only the speakers will be being filmed, as everyone else should hopefully be off camera and on mute. So before we pass on to Carly, a little bit of information from me. So for those that don't know, Spring has blossomed following the funding in the first round of the Ofwat competition, which enabled us to engage the sector, understand user needs, and build a service offering to meet those needs. In 2020, the sector identified an opportunity to improve collaboration, and we are here to enable innovation and collaboration to reinforce and enhance that existing excellence. We think that Spring is where technology meets culture, enabling a radical shift in collaboration and innovation to transform the sector. And we're on track to deliver the MVP, which you'll hear a lot about, which stands for the minimum viable product, in December. So we've got a very busy month coming up with very few Christmas parties. Spring's origins lay in the water sector innovation strategy, which envisaged a centre of excellence to provide catalysts for change and a means for achieving that change through collective action. And after securing funding in Ofwat's first competition, the team behind Spring formed in July this year and has since engaged with multiple stakeholders on the brand, the name, and more crucially, the functions. So our MVP functions have been designed and backed by users and those stakeholders groups, and will enable end-to-end innovation across the UK and the Irish water industry, which is a concept that hasn't been attempted before. These functions will launch in December, but we want to focus on the fully scaled functions today by walking you through some of those user journeys. So with that, I will now pass on to Carly Perry, the Consultant Executive Lead for Spring. Feel free to put your questions through Glisser at any point during this session, and we'll cover them at the end.
Fabulous. Thank you, Shauna. And hello, everyone. I'm very excited to welcome you to a session to learn more about Spring and what's going to be launching in December. Before I jump into the content, though, I just wanted to start by acknowledging the huge team effort that has gone into designing and standing up the minimum viable product. It's truly been a collaboration of new scales for the sector. So everything you will see here today has been part of that co-creation effort. So whether it be the innovation strategy that was created in 2020, whether it's the core Spring team, Thea colleagues, Shauna working together, whether it's the UKWIR team, the UKWIR board. We have a delivery board who've been incredibly active with water companies, supply chain, academia, entrepreneurs, Water UK. Many work streams and groups attended by supply chain, water companies, academia. We've had resources seconded in from water companies that have been incredibly helpful. We've had 80 plus organisations help test and validate our thinking. There's also a core group of supply chain supporting us financially, and I'll come on to more information about that. But I've been in the sector for close to 15 years now, and I just really wanted to start by saying how excited I am personally around this, but also the excitement that I'm picking up from other people in the sector. So I think a huge thank you, first of all, to everybody who has contributed so far, but also thank you in advance for those who will come and engage with us from December once we launch and play with the services once they're live. So on that note, as Shauna mentioned, a lot of work went into the IWC bid that provided the funding for this phase of work to design and stand up the MVP. The ambition was set out in that bid that Spring will be an innovation accelerator that enables collaboration within and beyond the sector to drive transformational innovation. So since coming on board in July, we've really been driving that ambition and really getting refinement of the service offering that's going to be going live. So we've done quite a few things in that time. We have engaged with a really vast amount of stakeholders to understand their needs to build into this model and what you're going to see today. We've refined the service offering based on that, but we've also created an operating model. We've created a funding strategy that will transition Spring from where it's at today through to a not-for-profit cost-covering model. So a huge amount of work has gone into that as well to make sure that Spring is a sustainable business going forward. We've also engaged with partners. So we're talking to quite a few partners across technology, knowledge transfer, the challenge process that you'll see today, so that we can augment the excellence that already exists out there. So it's been a really busy few months. And as Shauna mentioned, with under a month to go until launch, what we want to do today is focus in on the service offering so that we can tell you more about what to expect when we do go live. So it's worth reminding ourselves about why the concept of a centre of excellence was first introduced. The sector has made fantastic progress over recent years when it comes to innovation. At the individual company level, there's some really great applications of innovation happening to solve some big problems. So it's been fantastic to see that progress. However, where Spring comes into play is to reduce some of the duplication of efforts that happen at the individual company level and really provide the collaboration, the community, to bring everybody together to solve problems in a collective unit. So one of the key pieces of the puzzle is the water innovation strategy. So in 2020, the strategy was created, and on the screen you can see the themes from that strategy. This is going to be a core foundation for what Spring works on. So Spring is here to enable this strategy. It's here to enable the community to deliver against this strategy. So the strategy ensures that people understand the priorities, but Spring will take it a step further and provide the community infrastructure for people to be able to deliver against this. So some of that support that Spring will be giving will look like a challenge setting process against these themes. And I'll go into more information on all of these in just a second. It will be building communities to discuss and problem solve against each of these themes. It will brokerage partnerships for people to come together and build more powerful collaborations by putting expertise together. We'll be matchmaking innovators to test beds. So what are the right test beds for innovators to be using? We'll be signposting to funding opportunities. We'll also be sharing knowledge and doing knowledge transfer as a business, and also having better innovation practice through mentoring services as well. So let me tell you a little bit more about practically what all of that looks like. Okay, so how will you actually be able to engage with Spring services once we go live in December? So the problem solvers out there, you could be anything from an individual innovator, excuse me. You could be an SME, you could be a large corporate with innovative solutions, you could be academia. So the services that are going to be there for you will be a process that allows you to submit transformational ideas. So we're building a really great portal that you will all be able to use to submit your ideas. We'll publish challenges that will be targeted around the innovation themes, and we'll also do an open call for innovation. Spring will then assess and cascade the ideas that come in to all water companies in the UK and Ireland. As Shauna mentioned, we are here for all companies across the region. So innovation managers and SMEs will be involved in that process, but we'll also be building communities and partnerships through a community part of the portal that allows groups to come together and discuss like-minded problems. We'll also be providing a service that allows you to search for appropriate test beds for you to test your innovation. Spring will also be signposting to leveraging funding opportunities. So what funding opportunities beyond Ofwat's fund are there out there that could be leveraging? We've all discussed as a sector that there's opportunity that's not being unlocked in that space at the moment. So all of this for the problem solvers, for the innovators, has been designed to minimise costs and maximise opportunities for you. So it will create a single source for you to submit ideas that then get cascaded to all water companies, reducing the duplication of efforts that you currently have in that space. So from a problem owner's perspective, so more than likely we're talking about water companies here, but as customers, society, we all have our own role to play here, but for the sake of what we're talking about today, we're talking about water companies. So water companies will work with Spring to facilitate transformational ideas. So we will work together to set a challenge aligned with the innovation strategy. Water companies will work with Spring to assess the ideas that come in, receive pitches from innovators, and ultimately create collaborative projects. We'll also be providing a facilitation service that brings the right water companies together to work on opportunities. So we will be there to support companies to opt in of collaborative work and help to mobilise that work. The testbed facility service that I talked about will also play a role within the challenge process so that Spring can identify the best facility for a particular project to be using. And again, that will reduce the duplication that we currently see in the sector of people trialling innovations multiple times. Spring will also be a knowledge transfer partner. So a really critical service that we're going to be offering is to provide a consistent and centralised and digestible framework for learnings to be shared across the sector. So we will provide a service where we can share the information amongst water companies to help them learn from each other and accelerate lessons, either successes or failures, that can help people to accelerate their internal work. We'll also have an innovation mentoring service. So we will build out a better innovation practice by mentoring across the sector. And it's worth noting this particular service isn't particularly tailored to water companies. It could be supply chain, it could be individual innovators who are out there, but the ultimate benefit being to improve innovation practice across the whole. And so then we have government and regulators. So your strategies and priorities can feed into the challenges that Spring is setting. So we can make sure that we are driving the priorities that you have. Spring can also work with you to eliminate any of the barriers to success that we see along the way. So we can make sure that there's a clear line of sight between the innovation and the outcomes. So all of this is going to improve efficiency across the sector. So to wrap all of that up, Spring will be a centralised platform in the technology and in the broader sense, but it will also be demystifying existing process. So for those new to the sector or for those who need translation of how we work, we will be there to demystify existing process. Spring will also be there to signpost information, signpost open data, and really there to be the knowledge bank to help innovation thrive. So we will be enabling collaboration and innovation in many different ways. It's important to mention that whilst I've talked about these benefits from the perspective of users, all of the benefits will ultimately be passed on to customers. So that gives you a bit of a walkthrough of the service offering. It's worth me just pointing out what you can expect when we launch on the 20th of December. So we will be staggering the release of services. We will be doing a first release on the 20th of December that will provide an update to our website. So some of you have probably already seen our website. If you haven't, we can send a link out, but Spring-Innovation for those who haven't had a look around. We'll be extending the information that's available there and talking about some of our service offerings. So our testbed facility list will be live. Our funding opportunities signposting will be live. We will have information available about the knowledge transfer service and how you can use that. We'll also have a portal that goes live as well. So that portal will help you to register for when challenges go live in January. So you'll be able to build your profile and you'll be able to opt in and opt out of partnership matchmaking, and you can start to engage with other profiles who've registered as well. You can start to engage with communities. So we'll have communities set up around the innovation themes and around key topics for us. We'll also have a community around feedback for Spring, so you can comment and give us information there. So you'll be able to start communicating with each other and with us through that. There'll also be a teaser of information around the challenges. So the plan is to launch the first challenge at the end of January, but that's when the second release of information will come out. So at the end of January, a challenge will be launched. We'll start dropping information on that challenge throughout January. So being the MVP, we will be holding back on some of these services, and we'll make it very clear where we're doing that and when you can expect more information to be launched. So that's the service offering. I wanted to just discuss and share with you who will be delivering all of this. So Spring has always been about augmenting existing excellence, and we're in discussions with the first group of partners to help us deliver what the service offering looks like. So on testbeds, we are talking to UK Water Partnership and Water Test Network to use the existing information and to migrate it and host it through Spring. So we've had some great conversations there, and we're in the process of doing that. On challenges, we're working with ISLE to trial a partnership and use their brilliant expertise on how to run challenge processes. So we're working on what that looks like together at the moment. From a platforms perspective, we're working with the Salesforce team to help build a flat platform that will meet your needs that we've heard through all of the requirements workshops and engagement that we've done. So we'll be releasing the first stage of that in December and then the second stage in January. On knowledge transfer, we are talking with WaterStart about how Spring can accelerate its knowledge transfer service by using the tried and tested framework that WaterStart use, whilst also linking into some of the information that they already have available. So from a water company perspective, a big thanks to water companies for not only supporting Spring financially, matching the MVP funds, contributing to the future the 10% for the Future Innovation Fund bid that we've put in. But there's expertise coming through in weekly meetings. There's seconded staff, there's people involved in work streams. So obviously the water companies are a huge and dedicated source for us for Spring. From a supply chain perspective, we are really heartened at the support we're getting from the supply chain. So not only on time and energy and work streams, but financially as well. So we've got a core group of supply chain who have created a seed fund for us to help get us through to the next phase. So we're really grateful for that. There's also a lot of logos that aren't on here from supply chain of people who have helped in work streams and have helped with interviews along the way as well. And then also, I just wanted to call out the support and thanks to academia and government and regulators. And again, not all logos are on here, but we have been really heartened by the support that we've had from academia, as well as government and regulators sharing their vision with us and helping to steer us along the way as well. So a huge thanks to everybody here. As I say, a huge thanks to everybody as well who are not mentioned on here. The community is so large at this point, it's difficult to get on a slide. But we are really looking forward to those of you on the call who we haven't engaged with yet, welcoming you into the community when we launch and getting you involved in the services that we're offering as well. So I quickly just wanted to cover off as well of what you can expect from the Spring team once Spring launches. So the roles for the minimum viable product are Managing Director, Programme Manager, Innovation Facilitator, Innovation Mentor, and a Marketing Lead. So the MD will be there to lead, to advocate, to build partnerships, and really steer Spring through its next phase. The programme manager will obviously be there to manage the programme of work and really get clear on what needs to be delivered in the MVP phase. So the MVP phase will be January to June next year before we do another iteration. Innovation facilitator, they will be there to manage that challenge process that I walked you through. The innovation mentor is there to do the matchmaking for test beds, to give funding advice, to build out a better innovation framework and to mentor people across the sector. The marketing lead is there to not only do Spring marketing, but also work on the knowledge transfer service as well and how we can make sure that we're shouting loud and proud about the learnings that are being shared through Spring. So what are we doing in terms of recruitment? We have submitted a second bid to Ofwat Innovation Fund that will transition us from where we are now to standing on our own 2 feet. Obviously, that comes with a level of uncertainty around it. So what we're doing is making recruitment decisions to de-risk that uncertainty. What that looks like is we have chosen to recruit a managing director at risk, but the other roles we will wait until we have more financial long-term security. So there will be a team managing Spring. We're discussing what those options are at the moment, but we will be putting an advert out for a managing director, hopefully sometime in the next month. So keep your eyes open for that. All other roles will be advertised once we've got to the point of a little bit more funding security and de-risked going forward. So I mentioned before that Water UK have been a core partner in our delivery board. I just wanted to share a fantastic quote that Water UK have provided for us today. So water is an important vehicle for delivering some of government's most pressing objectives: net zero, levelling up, making Britain a hub for innovation and global investment. Spring will accelerate how the water industry and the supply chain will step up to meet these challenges in new ways and at a faster pace than ever before, which I think is a really nice way of summarising what the ambitions are and what the vision is for Spring.
Carly, I think you've accidentally got yourself on mute.
Thank you. So just to start wrapping up, what do we need from you? So for Spring to be a success, we're going to need the community to engage with this. So the first step is keep an eye out for the portal registration information that we will share on the 20th of December. So at that point, you can sign up and start playing with the functionality. Then it would be great if you can familiarise yourself with the portal and the website capabilities. We'll be providing guidance on how the portal works and giving you all of the induction that you need to it. If you can sign up to the Spring communities and get involved in the discussion, that's going to be a really great way for us to start building communities, building knowledge, but also for us Spring to test functionality as well. And also start getting ready for Spring's first challenge that will be launched in late January. It's worth noting that this is a minimum viable product. And so what that means for us is that not everything will be live, not everything will be polished. We may only have web capability, not mobile capability. So things like that, we would appreciate patience with us whilst we roll out releases, but we will communicate with you as we're doing that. But what we really want from you is to help us learn. We want to hear what your experience is like and share your feedback and experience with us on interacting with the services and the portal. So just to wrap all of that up then, and Shauna mentioned this at the beginning, but really what we see Spring doing is it's where technology meets culture and enables a radical shift in collaboration and innovation to transform the sector. So with that, Shauna, I'll hand back over to you and we can move into questions.
Thank you very much. It does feel in equal parts daunting and exciting that we go live in 17 working days, and there are still many more milestones to pass, but hopefully that's given you all some clarity on what they are and why they're so important to the core services of Spring. So hopefully on the screen now we should flash up the Glisser URL again. I know it's working because I can see people posting questions and boosting questions up to the top. For those questions we don't have time to get to, rest assured we'll either put them on our FAQ section of our website so that we can get a collective answer on that, or we'll provide a mailing list to those that attended today. So now that we have provided some insights, I'd like to open the conversation up to the panel. On the panel today, we have Harry Armstrong, Director of Regulatory Policy for Ofwat. He sees that as winners of the first round of the Innovation Fund, Ofwat and Spring will naturally work together to create a healthier and more productive ecosystem. We also have Paul Horton, CEO of Future Water. He sees the benefits of supporting the move to single trials feed in. He hopes that Future Water will feed in and feed back to barriers to innovation. We have Steve Kay, CEO of UKWIR. He expects that Spring and UKWIR will naturally interact and work on the alignment between research to innovation. We have Leslie Parker, Innovation Engagement from Severn, Trent. They hope to interact with Spring by continuously driving maximum benefit to enable effective delivery and implementation across the sector. We also have Carly Perry, who you've heard from already. So we've got a couple of facilitated questions and then we'll open it up to the Glisser ones. So if I can pick all of the panel's brains on this one, actually. What do you see now that you've seen the core services and offerings that Spring has? What do you see as being the biggest benefits of Spring? And Leslie, we'll come to you first with that one, if that's all right.
Yeah, hi Shauna. So clearly lots of great functions and features and services that Carly's just talked about in Spring. So it's bringing together lots of building blocks for us to collaborate better, because that's what we intended to do when we set Spring out in our strategy. For me, I guess there's the sort of two biggest benefits that I'm getting quite excited about are around us being able to collaborate as a sector on some of the macro issues. So we know things like carbon and the environment are just important to all of us, and we're all tackling them and have been individually. So being able to tackle that together is going to be great. And I think the second thing that you kind of talked about in some of the services and functionality is about learning. So being able to learn as a sector on things that we haven't really got a grasp on yet. We need some thought leadership around things like the hydrogen economy, where we don't yet know how it might play out. We don't yet know how we want to work within the hydrogen economy, but we know we need to learn about it. So I think tackling the issues together and learning together is going to be great.
Thank you, Leslie. Very comprehensive answer. Paul, over to you. What do you think the biggest benefits of Spring will be?
Thanks, Sean, and thanks, Carly, for the presentation. Very, very comprehensive. I mean, from a practical side, as an organisation representing the supply chain, there's been the demand to move towards a more focused approach around innovation. And Carly, I think you referenced open data, and if we can get to the point of having the methodologies that mean single trials become more common than multiple trials, that would be a huge change for the supply chain, and that would actually be a big tick box approach. And then on a practical side, from Future Water's viewpoint, exploring how we can link in the Water Dragons process to support the drive towards a more focused approach in terms of innovation. We would see that as a really big benefit.
Thanks, Paul. Harry, you must be in agreement with those two comments there. Can you think of any additional benefits from a regulator perspective?
I mean, yeah, to say first, I would agree with everything that said there. I think the biggest opportunity is making the most of new opportunities, and that's both, I think from our side, primarily they're bringing new ideas in and trying them and doing that in an efficient way and getting, those ideas spread across the sector, but also learning from what works and what doesn't work through these trials, and that gets spread across, because, as has been said, we've got some really big challenges up against us, and we don't really know what the best, most efficient approaches to solving these challenges are, what works in different contexts. So I think for us, those are the two things, or the two opportunities here, which we think are really exciting.
I totally agree, and I think knowledge transfer is sometimes put in the box of sharing successes when actually it's sharing learnings in whatever guise they come. So that's a really interesting point. Steve and Carly, I know being close to the project, singling out one of the biggest benefits is going to be hard and akin to choosing a favourite pet or child. But opening up to you, what do you think the biggest benefits will be? Steve, I'll kick it to you first, and then to you, Carly.
I mean, you picked off most of the ones I had written down, but I guess just to look at it from a slightly different perspective, I mean, building on Paul's comment there about the supply chain, I know, having worked in a utility and worked with small businesses, it's a bit like an elephant and a flea, and it's very difficult to sort of get in and negotiate with all these different companies. So it'll certainly bring one door. And I think on the back of that, we could start to maybe present the UK water sector more in a business context. And historically, it's been quite difficult working with government in terms of leveraging funding, etc. So I think if we can show that we're going to increase markets, we're going to increase GDP and things like that, then, as well as all the industry benefits and efficiencies and customer benefits, there's another side to this. And in the long run, I think there's a real opportunity to showcase the sector more as a business entity as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've seen a question pop up on Glisser that is very similar. So hopefully we'll be able to drill down into that in more detail towards the end of the session. Carly, is there anything that hasn't been captured that is one of your favourites?
Yeah, I mean, look, most things have most definitely been captured, but one thing I'd like to call out is more around the cultural aspect of this. So, it's really hard to quantify as a benefit. However, I think, Spring has an ambition to make the water sector a leader in open innovation. So culturally, can there be enhancements to openness and trust that happen, that drive more innovation? So as a benefit, I'd be really excited to see that as well.
Great, thank you. Very good overview of benefits. So thank you all for those nuggets. Paul, picking up on your point you mentioned about supply chain, how do you think Spring can help with IP concerns that you've been hearing about?
I think, so on a practical level, one of the challenges that lots of companies have, especially at the SME level, is the amount of time and effort they've put into developing ideas and how that's perceived. And I think in terms of Spring and how, say, Future Water could work with Spring, it's to come up with a system that helps support IP and patents, that helps explain to suppliers that actually the space here and your IP is hugely valuable, and the more we value that, back to Steve's point, the more we start to have the sector that actually drives forward not just innovation but drives forward the businesses that developing something that's really interesting and really fascinating and okay, and ultimately customers, but equally for the future GDP of the UK. And just a quick reference to one of the questions in Glisser, this means IP and patents and all of that thinking coming from any sector. And we should recognise that there's some brilliant stuff that's been happening across other sectors that's actually really applicable to what we're doing in water, but trying to bring it into the mix is always a huge challenge. And I just want to add one final thing, touching on what Carly said. If we end up becoming this really exciting, really interesting, really different sector, which we all want it to be, how much more interesting will that be to people from a more diverse background? And we become a more inclusive sector as well. And that's not just an offshoot of something like Spring. I think it could really be one of the major drivers. The more interesting we become, the more interesting we are to people across all range of ages, backgrounds, and that would be a huge change.
Thank you. That definitely feeds into my next question. So a slightly different vein, but still connected somewhat to the first question on benefits. What would some of the key success measures for Spring look like? So I'm going to keep the panel on their toes and ask for that to be asked in reverse order. So Carly, let's start with you on that one.
Sure, thank you, Donna. So I think there's a lot of metrics for us to consider for Spring, but I think some of the obvious ones to begin with will be things like people engaged through the portal and through the services, and what does engagement look like there? But that's a reasonably kind of transactional success measure. I think at the larger level, we want to be looking at problems solved. You know, how many problems has Spring facilitated solutions to, and how's it accelerated learnings, like you say, if there's failures as well, how have we accelerated the understanding and learnings around those? I also think that revenue generated is going to be an important one for Spring. Whilst we're a not-for-profit cost covering model, we are going to need as a business to keep on top of our own funding, and therefore that's going to be a metric for us as well. Obviously, people showing their value by engaging and paying for our services is also a positive thing for Spring. But I think another softer one is around collaborations and partnerships formed. So through the Spring community and infrastructure provided, how many collaborations, partnerships have been formed that then go on to solve the problems as well?
Thanks, Carly. Steve?
Yeah, just to build on that, I think there's potentially a danger of having too many, so there's something we've got to watch out for. But as well as a sort of hard and soft way of looking at things, you could look at it in terms of sort of lead and lag measures. So lead measures would be, how do we create the environment for Spring to thrive, and the lag measures would be more about the outcomes, the actual impact in the sector. So things that Carly just said about income and number of ideas, they could be kind of creating the right environment. But ultimately, and it's difficult this, because I know through UKWIR, how do you actually measure the financial impact of something that's been implemented on lots of different companies? So that relies a lot on getting data out of companies. But then there are other measures like impact on carbon footprint and things like that. And then the last point really I would make is, working in a similar organisation, that there's a huge value in surveys as well, in actually asking people what they think about Spring, and is it good, is it not so good, why not, and you know, don't underestimate the value of the survey feedback as well. So they're just front of mind thoughts on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that two-way engagement is going to be absolutely essential to how Spring ramps itself up and iterates its services. Harry, anything to add?
I think that covers a lot. The only thing I would add would be coming back to a point Carly was making, I think, in the beginning, which is being really clear on where Spring sits in the broader innovation ecosystem here. You know, there are lots of other processes and things that are happening. You know, we should be really clear as to what Spring's doing within that system and therefore what it's trying to achieve, and not, you know, there can be a tendency in the sector, I think, to try and grab hold of all of the problems and try and solve all of them. That, you know, we can't do that. So we just need to be really clear on what bits Spring is biting off and how it's going to achieve that. Yeah,
I think that's really important. And quite an ambitious list of KPIs that have been collected amongst all of you, but very much needed, especially, I guess, given the unfortunate rap that the water sector has been getting of late. So to that end, Leslie, how do you think innovation, acceleration, and coverage can change customer perception?
Well, I guess, you know, we're very aware in the water sector that customers rightly expect us to spend their money wisely, and innovation can be expensive and it comes with risk, and it doesn't always work. So we need to make sure we're placing our bets wisely. So I'm really hoping that Spring's going to help us identify and tackle the challenges that are most important to customers, the things that they really care about, and the things that will drive innovation in areas that they're interested in. And when you look at initiatives like citizen science or other things where we're engaging with customers around the things that matter to them, and you know, as a sort of an area of science, and water as a science, we can work with our customers a lot better. So I think Spring will help us tap into some of that by identifying the things they care about and tackling them.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point. And if I can then kick it back to Harry and Paul. Harry, you slightly touched on it in your answer of the last question, but how can or should innovation change within the sector? So we'll go to you first, Harry.
Yeah, I think coming back to what we were saying earlier, I think the critical thing with an effective innovation system or set of processes is that you try things out. So you take a certain amount of risk, that you work collaboratively as much as possible on those shared problems, and try lots of different approaches to those problems and assess them as much as possible in an evidence-based way. And then you make that evidence available and accessible to all those who need to use it. And then you scale up the opportunities and ideas that work and implement them. So, you know, to be able to do all of that, I think, you know, we're in a really good place. I think we're all pretty clear on where there are a number of barriers that exist at the moment. And I think Spring, in terms of what you've outlined as a set of activities, is definitely going to answer some of those barriers, particularly on the kind of earliest stage of ideas coming in, building those collaborations, identifying those problems and challenges. So I think, you know, getting that right, at least to begin with, and then building from there is a pretty good place to be.
Thank you. Anything to add, Paul?
I think Harry touched on it really. The open data and sharing and the scale, and therefore I would argue the speed of uptake is going to be a critical element. And I just come back to the whole IP and patents point, in that if you're getting more innovators coming into the sector, more IP being developed, that's a huge benefit for the sector. It makes the sector much more attractive, not just to new people, but to people who want to invest in aspects of the sector as well. And you end up pushing forward some of the technological changes and people changes that are really needed, and that needs an active IP market behind it. Perfect.
Last question then before we head to the popular Glisser ones. Last but not least, we obviously heard from Carly about how the foundations of Spring were rooted in the Water 2050 innovation strategy. Leslie, you were a core piece to that strategy. So in your opinion, how do you think Spring can help deliver that strategy and keep aligned to it?
Yes, so Spring, or the Centre of Excellence, as we were calling it then, was a key deliverable from the Water 2050 strategy. So we are tasking Spring with delivering quite a lot, really. I mean, everything that we've sort of talked about today, and asking it to kind of stay true to the pillars of that strategy that we developed, the 7 themes that we focused on. But we also want to build on Ofwat's 5 innovation themes that we kind of weave in with that as well. So delivering some world-class service and world-class functions is a big ask, but the Spring accelerator and the kind of the 2 sides of the incubators that Carly's talked about will be key for delivering the strategy.
Perfect. Thank you, everyone, for your rich insights. You know, these groups of stakeholders are not the only ones that Spring want to interact with, but they have been core to developing some of the services and feeding back on what our initial scope should be. So if we can flick back to the GLISSA questions now, and Carly, if you can pull up that slide that has the information for anyone that hasn't been able to access that. So there is a question here which I will ask Steve. So if we accept that the water sector and society in general needs transformational innovation with exponential growth, aka true green swans, how does it propose to support these technologies from the TRL 345 level through to TRL 8/9?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, going back to my initial, or your initial comment, Shauna, about UKWIR and Spring. UKWIR currently does research on a national level, and Spring will do innovation on a national level. And hopefully we'll have a platform to be able to take ideas from lower TRL to higher TRL. So some of that lower TRL could be done in UKWIR, some of it could be done in universities. If we have a stronger bridge to academia, we can have a better flow of low TRL things coming forward. And Spring has to have visibility and connectivity with all that and bring things in and be able to trial it. Because I guess Spring is more about closer to market innovation, the higher TRL technologies and ideas. So we have got to get that flow coming in and be able to, as you said earlier, direct them to the most appropriate test sites, be able to test them in a way where everybody can see the benefit, etc., and then they flow into the companies. So I hope that answered the question.
Yeah,
yeah,
it definitely does. Thank you, Steve. Next question, and Carly, feel free to pick up the earlier one if you feel like there's anything you want to add. How does Spring anticipate pulling learning and expertise in from other sectors?
So, sorry, bear with me, just having mute issues. I think it's a great question to begin with, and it's worth noting what we've done through this process to bring in learnings from other sectors to this point. So we have been engaging with people like UKWIR, who are the Rolls-Royce Innovation Catalyst, to learn from how they've set up their business and the learnings that they've got in creating an innovation centre of excellence. We've also been talking to Energy Innovation Centre as well as doing research on lots of other organisations. So there's learnings being brought in to create Spring, but then also there's future learnings to bring in for Spring. So what we'll be looking to do is to make sure that the challenges are publicised far and wide. So we're not going to be talking to the same stakeholders in the water sector. We're going to make sure that those challenges are publicised beyond. We've got some marketing mechanisms in place to be able to do that, to bring in thinking from other sectors. We're also going to be creating a really diverse board for Spring, so that will have people from other sectors and entrepreneurial thinking on it that will bring in different learning that way as well. A lot of our supply chain supporters also, some of the larger companies are global cross-sector companies, and they will be providing strategic advice into Spring from a cross-sector perspective as well. So I think there's multiple ways that we can do that, and it's something we're very conscious of and that we will be getting into our ambitions for the new year.
Thanks, Carly. Sorry if I miss anyone's questions. Where everyone is voting on them, they're dancing around my page. So it's not intentional, and we promise we will get back to them. Question for Harry. Can problem owners, governments and regulators from outside the UK and Ireland engage with Spring?
Yes, I mean, I wouldn't see a reason not to do that. I think, again, we talk about shared problems. You know, these aren't UK, Wales, Scotland, Ireland, whatever based problems. They're very similar issues we experience others. And, you know, I think, as was said earlier, there are also opportunities for innovation to come in from outside. So, I mean, I think this is a question, you know, for Carly and Shauna and Steve as much as anybody. But yeah, I mean, I wouldn't see any issue with that as long as it's bringing benefits to UK and Welsh customers. Great,
thanks. Carly, Steve, anything to add?
Yeah, I was just going to add to that. We have already had some great global conversations, US, Australia, Netherlands and others, around how they can engage with Spring as a model and how we can be sharing problems and solutions. So it's definitely on the radar to be able to do that. And I think, as Harry says, there's definitely a commonality in the problems that we're trying to solve. And within the ethos of open innovation, definitely want to be able to work with global partners on that.
Perfect.
And I think we always said up front when we had initial discussions with Ofwat that the strategy was not just about the Ofwat fund, but we wanted to align. The reason for that, as Harry alluded to, potentially we can leverage funding from other areas, you know, from the likes of UKRI, Innovate UK, and the more academic early TRL stuff we talked about, you know, that there are broader opportunities. So I think we're always in that with our eyes open, that it's broader than the Ofwat focal area. But obviously we want to align it as much as possible. And you know, there's a lot of dependencies there, and we want to do the best job as we can. But I think, you know, being able to going back to the question, absolutely, why wouldn't we bring ideas in from beyond that area?
Perfect, thank you. I'm going to have to start getting strict with timings of answers so we can get through as many as possible. Carly, one more for you. How are Spring approaching defining and scoping challenges for the release in January? Will this be taken directly from the Water 2050 strategy, or will you be working with the problem owners to refine/adapt their focus?
Yeah, great question. And admittedly, we don't have all the answers on this one just yet. We are working on it. So as I mentioned, we're working with ISLE to bring in some of their expertise in this space. The conversations that we have had so far are that we will create a challenge around one of the innovation strategy themes. We will work with the problem owners, so the SMEs who truly understand the problem, to create a challenge around that. So it will use the innovation strategy as a foundation, but we will create an actual problem statement based on that foundation. So we'll be doing that throughout December with the right stakeholders in the sector, and then we'll be releasing more information on that in January.
Thank you. Leslie, one for you. What are the water companies doing structurally to make themselves more receptive to earlier TRL level solutions by de-risking their commitments to time and costs necessary to engage?
It's fair to say it's different across the sector. I'll try and keep this brief, but I can speak for Severn Trent in that we have the fortune of having an innovation team which is set up to deliver exactly that. We are focusing in more around how we liaise and broker our relationship with Spring. So we're looking at maximising the opportunities there. Other peers in our sector are smaller water-only companies or have different setups. So it's going to be a little bit horses for courses, and we're sort of working that out. And this is why Spring is so important, that we have that kind of collaborative space where we can work on those things together.
Perfect, thank you. Another one for Harry. How do you think regulators will travel on this journey? Will they also adapt to change?
Yeah, that's quite an open question, isn't it? Yeah, how to answer. I mean, I think we definitely, let me come at this from kind of the long-term perspective, because innovation is obviously about trying to achieve things not straight away, but trying to achieve things for, you know, maybe near future, but in the future. With the proposals that have gone out for the PR24 kind of adaptive planning, long-term strategy elements of that, there is certainly a move to trying to look at, you know, the problems and challenges the sector face through that long-term perspective and investment in the long term. And I'd really hope that that's you know, a signal to the sector that actually innovation is part of that. So, you know, being able to look ahead and see those problems that are coming down the line and saying that we don't have solutions to them yet, but we need to invest in them. And part of that investment plan is going to happen now. Maybe that's through the Innovation Fund, maybe that's through other things and through Spring, but that we are looking at opportunities for the future through the lens of what we can do now. So we are certainly kind of going on that journey, I think, and moving towards more of that, you know, thinking about this as a long-term process. So yeah, I think we are changing as a result of the change that needs to happen. So yeah, so I think that would be my answer to that question.
Thank you, perfect answer. Last question, and it's one that has been brought up throughout the process, and you know, it's one that is very core to one of our you know, ethoses of instead of duplicating existing excellence, but instead bolstering them and providing a centralized point. So Carly, question for you: how does the Spring service duplicate or overtake existing ways for innovators to reach water companies? And I guess that is also kind of linked to a question further down of how do we not effectively overtake or duplicate you know, platforms and organisations that already exist, the likes of Future Water and British Water.
Yeah, great question, and as Shauna said, one that has come up through all of our conversations, and having the water companies so closely involved with designing this has helped us to tease that out and keep talking about it. But I think the short distinction to make is that Spring will be focusing on sector-wide problems. So Spring will launch challenges, bring innovators together to solve problems that we have agreed all water companies have. There are still regional problems that water companies have. So we are not here to channel all innovation through Spring. We are here to create a centralized platform for sector-wide innovation. So we don't see our service replacing those existing platforms that are already out there. In fact, we've heard incredibly positive things from customers of those platforms. So we want to make sure that that service exists. But what we're doing here is enhancing on top of that from a sector-wide perspective.
Thank you. And that concludes the Q&A session. Though to reiterate, we will answer all of these questions and make them visible to those delegates. So that leaves me with a thanks. So a thanks to the panels, Harry, Paul, Steve, Leslie and Carly. A thanks to you guys for attending and for being interested and engaged with what the Spring vision and ambition is. And a thanks in advance for being engaged with the launch on the 20th of December and working with us and engaging with us and providing that valuable feedback that we can learn and iterate and develop and upscale. It's going to be a really important factor of how Spring operates. So please don't shy away from it. We promise not to be sensitive with listening to that feedback because feedback is a gift. So thank you everyone for your time, your patience and your engagement, and we look forward to speaking with you soon. And please follow the Spring LinkedIn page, and also keep your eyes peeled on the website. So thank you everyone. Have a lovely afternoon and a great festive period if we don't speak to you between now and then.